And so much of therapy is being able to work through a rupture. Yeah, and both change as a consequence of that, and that reflects a mature process that can be transferred into other relationships as well, as difficult as that is.
It's one of the big flaws, it seems, with human behaviour, because the more convincing you are, the more someone puts faith in your ability. And John and I were talking about this before, of the reality is absolutes are rarely true, particularly in complex systems. And we're talking about researchers within our field, that it applies to any field, of people who, when they talk about their research or the expert topic that they're in, how they actually communicate particular messages. Where there's one person I was thinking of who always uses language of saying things like, actually, we know that this is the case, and actually, and it's just...
And how dependent are they and their careers and their funding on that mindset?
Highly, actually,
and the way in which they're going to distort their data to reflect that.
It's actually it's interesting, actually. Too. Makes me think of, say, Tanya last week, who...
And not necessarily consciously, but just naturally, you're going to...
It's unconscious bias that you have towards, perpetuating your own career.
Well, I think it's someone like...
if you're totally dependent on an experiment working to be...
Well, I think of someone like Tanya, who's very humble, and I think actually so level-headed with understanding...
But you come out with these absolute comments.
Well, interestingly though too, she's someone who, she's got her eggs in multiple baskets. She's not a full-time... Well, she does a lot of research, but she actually does other things like
that's useful.
And all this
That's useful.
So it's just interesting because you tie it to how strongly is their identity and perhaps their livelihood associated with their being labelled the guru and so on. Because I'm sure that has a big part in it, where they need to maintain a certain...
It's their brand.
A certain brand, a certain perception.
Okay.
Yeah. You want to chat about anything else, John? Actually, one thing I think we haven't really talked much about, this question I go back before, is thinking about manifesting some of these behavioural traits in a positive way. Because again, thinking about people from a high performance standpoint, the reality is certain addictive tendencies actually can be very favourable in terms of their willingness to...
Well, this is the question, are they, we spoke about this, are they favourable or are they ultimately destructive, but they can be perceived to be favourable?
Or are they favourable for that particular task, but are they ultimately destructive for the person?
Yes. Yeah, well...
And is that what you tend to find?
What I was curious from your perspective, if it's a task that where obsessionality is helpful, let's just say you're trying to be elite in a particular field, presumably you're in the 0.1 percentile of natural ability, and conscientiousness is required to work extremely hard because you're competing against other naturally gifted people who are working extremely hard. There are certain areas where that's of value. Maybe that's not the case with respect to athletes, where as opposed to, say, more intellectual pursuits in the athletic realm, that obsessionality could lead to overtraining and a lack of recovery,